So Shabbat Shalom. Not too long ago, someone called my office and they wanted to talk about ideas. They basically were looking to give away money, which is always a nice call to get. And they wanted in particular to give to Jewish causes, and they wanted to know what organizations I thought were worthy of giving. And the first organization that I thought of immediately and still hold by is the Anti-Defamation League. I don't know, raise your hand if you're familiar with the Anti-Defamation League. So many people are. The Anti-Defamation League, their existence is to fight anti-Semitism, right? Hate against the Jewish people. And this past Monday and Tuesday, I had the opportunity to go to the Anti-Defamation League's conference in New York City at the Javits Center. And I will say that it was extraordinary. And so I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about some of my takeaways from that conference, because I felt like I really learned a lot about a lot of things. So I'm going to sort of start with the obvious, which many of you may have sort of seen this week, which is the end. I'm going to start at the end, which is on the last day at the plenary, there was David Schwimmer from Friends and Gal Gadot. So that was actually like a really fun and big deal. Yes, a little bit because of who they are in our Jewish world, but far more so because of the words that they shared from the podium. And Gal Gadot, absolutely exquisite, dressed in black with hair pulled back just so, stood up and said something along the lines of like, I am Gal, I am a mom, I am a wife, I am a daughter, I am a Jew, and I am Israeli. And then she said, let me say that again. And she did the whole thing really slowly and very intentionally. And then she said, I never in my life would have thought that it would have taken courage to say those things. She would then go on to talk about the importance of standing up in this moment of time for the Jewish people, for being proud Jews, even when that does take courage nowadays, and also for being lovers of Israel, even when that feels challenging with the world out there. So those two were really big speakers at the end. David Schwimmer spoke about the silence of Hollywood. And in particular, he mentioned the Oscars and how interesting and disappointing it was that his colleagues, especially Jewish ones, all of them, but especially the Jewish ones, have not spoken out about the captives, about what's happening, that they have remained pretty silent. And he felt particularly disappointed in Adrian Brody, that even though he had recently done a film about the Shoah, that he didn't use his very long acceptance speech to even mention any of sort of our Jewish history. So that was all sort of the interesting end plenary. But what was really interesting to me were the smaller sessions. So if you sort of imagine 5,000 people, but in a really nice hallway of the Javits Center, it was actually just coincidentally right next to the toy convention. And I went in the wrong door upon arrival, and I was like, where are all of the guards, right? As it turns out, toy conventions don't require guards. Jewish conventions do. So anyway, the sessions that I went to, and they were plentiful, I learned a bunch of different things, and I'm just going to share some of the highlights with you. The first thing that I learned is that the Anti-Defamation League has 7 researchers right now, 7 people that are on their staff fully devoted to doing research, and 67 academicians that are doing this work around the world. And what they're trying to see is like how some of the messaging that we're using in this like bigger global story of the Jewish people and Israel, how it lands and how it doesn't land. So here are some of the things that I thought were really interesting, and if you know more than me, then maybe you won't find it as interesting, but I actually thought it was. He said, or this group of panelists said, that one of the things that they found interviewing 250,000 people over recent days is that using the terms anti-Semitic or anti-Semitism or Zionism or anti-Zionism, they actually don't land. So what does that mean? It means that most people don't understand what you're talking about. And it definitely doesn't resonate with people in any way that generates positive emotions. Most people actually get really confused by both of those words and think they mean the opposite of what they actually mean. And so he says, like, try not to use those words. And when you do use those words, you actually need to sort of parenthetically say what they mean. You can't assume that people know it. And he also said, or they also said, and this is again based on 250,000 people that they surveyed, that to use them very sparingly. So, for example, and I think you might find this interesting, instead of saying like, wow, college administrator, what the teacher said in class felt really anti-Semitic to me. It doesn't do anything. But if you say, hello, college administrator, what my professor said in class made me feel really unsafe. Well, that changes hearts and minds. So it's a different language, right? So it's an interesting thing because the language that we use is what people connect with. So here's what else I learned, and these are more really interesting things from a different panel, is that nowadays, and by the way, you can cringe if you want because it is generational, but I'm going to do it anyway. Nowadays, I'm cringing as I say it, facts don't matter. Facts don't matter. People don't want experts anymore. They want influencers. They don't want people on top telling them what to think, what to believe. They want people from below teaching upward, and they don't want to be told data or anything of that sort. They want to be told stories. A personal story is the only thing now that changes minds and changes hearts. So again, no expert opinions, no facts. It's all about influencers and stories and personal stories. By the way, like this actually is really important for all of us as we try to go out there and change minds and hearts about what's happening to the Jewish people and also to Israel. Another thing that I learned, which was interesting, and I think you will find this interesting too, in the parties, right, the Democratic and Republican parties, 33% of Democrats are standing strong with Israel right now. Republicans are at 83%. Again, research. But what Jonathan Greenblatt, who runs the ADL, said is, please, Democrats, stay put. Meaning, don't jump your party to the other side because you feel like your party isn't standing strong with Israel. In fact, stay there and try to create change from the inside. It doesn't serve the Jewish people or Israel if everybody just jumps into a different party because that's where it feels most comfortable. Another thing that was interesting to me, and this was from Archie Gottesman, Rafi, I'm looking at you for a minute, yep, who has those really big pink billboards on the highways? Wait, yeah, from Jubilong? No one's seen these? Okay, you guys have to get on the highway more. Okay, Sharon's seen them. Okay, they're amazing. They're these incredible billboards, and they say all kinds of like juicy, snarky, and real things that you're like, oh my gosh, yes, I want to take you home with me. So for example, they say, I'm trying to think of some of my favorites. People who believe what they're saying don't need to wear masks. I wish I had some of my favorites. Things about, Oh gosh, okay. Next time I'm going to give you a whole bunch of the billboards. I see Jeremy back there. I'll post them on our social media next week for you guys. But anyway, there are these really big social media posts, and the reason that she said that billboards are actually really important is that no one can control what channel or station anyone else is listening to or what podcast, but everybody has to drive by a billboard. And so she said that she's found that to be an effective way to get information across, even when you can't really control what's going into the minds and the hearts. She said what she wants to do is to let people stop and to think. And that's really sort of the main idea. Outside of that, I would say that that for the most part, I went to one session which had leaders from all over the world. It had a leader from Canada, the Jewish leadership, and these are sort of, if you think about BJC, that kind of leadership position. Someone from Canada, someone from Australia, someone from South Africa, and someone from England. And they were telling their stories of what's been happening in their Jewish communities there, and I will tell you that none of it was good. But it was very interesting what they've been up against and where they've managed to stand firm and how, again, they've changed hearts and minds. The person who was coming from London said things have been very difficult there, as we all know, has been true in the EU. Canada said, of course, as we also know, that it's been a particularly surprising ride. South Africa said, as you also know, they could never have imagined what's been happening in South Africa, including, burning down synagogues and also really in major cities. Really feeling vulnerable as Jews. And probably the most interesting to me was the woman her name was Wendy, who represented South Africa, the Jewish community there. And she said that as soon as October 7th happened, soon after, the South African government came to them as a Jewish community and met with them. And then as it would turn out, they would later use that against them. They would use that meeting to say that they had actually met with representatives of Israel when they filed their case in the ICC and at the Durban Convention, or in Durban. So what she said is that what she's taken to doing is a lot of things to make people feel what it feels to be marginalized, isolated, hated. And she said she's done everything from taking the bridge in South Africa and filling it with signs of those who are being held in captivity and red balloons. And then she said on the government steps, she put, because they couldn't understand that children were also victimized from October 7th and some being held in captivity. And so they put 53 little stuffed animals all over the steps with blue balloons, and that people really came to understand just from seeing sort of these signs. So again, it's sort of trying to creatively think about how to tell our story in such a way that people are paying attention. So everybody, I'm sure, has been following Columbia and Barnard's story, as well as the Anti-Defamation League, again, just came out with the second iteration of what's happening on college campuses. If you've got children or grandchildren that are on colleges, it's actually very interesting. You'll see that there was a lot of upward movement, but sadly in our backyard, there was some downward movement. University of Maryland, Baltimore, University of Maryland, College Park, both went down. And I believe that Towson stayed the same. So pay attention to what the ADL is doing. I would say if you haven't yet emailed them and gotten on their email list, I would say it's probably one of the most important ones you can get on. If you have funds that you're looking to give to a good cause, their research and development groups are doing incredible work, as are their teams, and they're really doing everything imaginable to fight the hate, which is also called anti-Semitism. So Shabbat Shalom. And please God, we'll see better days to come.